Thank you, Mr. Pogazenti. Our next speaker needs no introduction to this audience. He is Mr. Justin Roux, and he is going to speak on innovation in copper, what India can do. Justin.
Yes, it's me again. So far, I have spoken about figures of world production. I've spoken to you about marketing. I've spoken to you about communications. But now, when we talk about innovation, I would like to speak to you about some really exciting stuff that India could do, or can do, or should do. And I'm going to kick it off by going back to this one slide I keep talking about. The three things that we know absolutely for certain are going to happen. The world population will rise. And as I said before, half of the world's population enjoy a standard of living that the other half want. And half of the world's population have taken 500 years to get there. And the other half are going to take 50. And this half that's already gone there has done it by polluting and making some bad decisions. And so the emerging countries, the big emerging countries, have got an opportunity to do that really well. But before I show you some of those fantastic things, I want to show you what I hope, for really good reason, is going to be the most frightening thing you're going to see in the next 2 days. And I'm going to show it to you now. Cross our fingers that the internet doesn't let us down. Right, the site you're looking at is called Worldometers, and it's giving us data absolutely live from around the world. So what we're looking at the top there is the current world population at 7.4 billion, and the births this year, and the deaths this year. These are all things that are happening right now. I want to scroll down this site, if I can. Here's when technology lets me down. Now, here we go. Thank you. Let's look at the environment. Forest loss this year. CO2 emissions this year. That's tons of CO2 being emitted into the environment right now as we speak. And look at the figure below it. This completely shocks me. 759 million people are undernourished in the world. Twice as many as that are overweight. In fact, there's nearly as many people are so overweight that we'd call them obese. Nearly matches the number of undernourished people. We need a solution, not for generating more food, but for putting the food and the mouths in the same place. It's that simple. And then one more to follow on from my predecessor's talk about energy. Let's have a look at energy. The top column there shows energy used in the world today, megawatt hours, and you can see it going up, and how much came from non-renewable sources and how much from renewable. And compare it to the amount of energy that's hitting the Earth from the sun right now. And then look a little bit further down and be utterly terrified that there are only 37 years left to the end of oil. And then electric cars won't be a wonderful alternative. Electric cars are going to be absolutely 100% necessary. With me there. So having shown you that, what can we do about it? Let's look at some wonderful things that are achievable. First thing, let's talk about solar photovoltaic energy. Even in Finland, where it's cold and they don't get much sunshine, especially in the winter, 1 kilowatt hits every square meter from the sun. The latest innovations with copper means that a copper ribbon of incredible softness can be produced. And because that ribbon is incredibly soft, it can be dropped onto incredibly thin pieces of silicon by a robot, not by a human hand, so that any variance in the copper will not crack the silicon. This has automated the construction of solar photovoltaic cells, which is the heart of solar energy. Today, we are looking into new sorts of silicon, different grades of silicon, to continue making this kind of energy possible. And driven by those innovations, we're going to see a 10% growth year on year in that market, consuming tin-coated copper, consuming steel, consuming aluminium. It's a fantastic industry. And those lower cost modules and government legislation mean this industry is only going to grow. And here's high efficiency conductors. This is a use for high grade copper. This is a use for pure copper. A high efficiency conductor will use oxygen-free copper. You can use them to produce magnets, the basic magnets that become part of hospital equipment. But more importantly, in generators and motors. Now have a look at that graph. Here you can see the oil per head equivalent consumption per person in your country versus the GDP. And we can see that the high GDP countries are normally consuming a lot of energy per person. India is down the bottom. GDP per person currently $1,500 a year. Tons of oil equivalent consumed 0.6. As India grows, as it undoubtedly will, it's going to consume more energy. The first thing you can do is generate it more cleanly. The second thing, high efficiency copper, low oxygen-free copper. The statistic which Europe needs to be ashamed of, and one of the delegates here actually spoke to me about this in the lunch break. There's the gentleman there raising his hand. There we go. We've been making the windings on our electrical motors out of low-grade scrap instead of oxygen-free copper. And this makes the motor less efficient. I'll tell you what the effect of that is. If we took every motor in Europe that was over 1 kilowatt, so every motor from washing machine upwards, and we used oxygen-free copper in the windings, we would save an amount of energy equivalent to 128 new power stations every year. That's massive. We made the wrong choice. India, you've got a chance to make a great choice. All those motor windings, you could be saving so much energy. And when I present this graph again in 10 years' time, if you'll invite me, you'll be down this end. And here's a use for recycled copper and a use for aluminium. And it's a use that makes me incredibly sad. At 265 million tons, India produces 15% more food than it needs. The current need is 230 million tons. You are the largest producer in the world of milk. You're the second largest producer in the world of fruit and veg. 40% of that will go to waste because it spoils, because there's no refrigeration. The refrigeration infrastructure of India is about 10% of what it should be. That's why this much food is wasted. To put it into context, there are more starving people in India than there are in sub-Saharan Africa. This year, a pile of grain will rot in India that is bigger than Australia's entire grain output for the year. But it doesn't need to be like this, because this is not advanced technology. This is simple technology. A good refrigeration cold chain is something we can all get on with right now. We can have foreign investors, foreign companies. We could do it any way we like. But solving this problem will create jobs, it will create use of metal, and it will mean a much, much, much better lifestyle for everybody in this country. India is currently, if you include all vehicles, the 6th biggest manufacturer in the world. I think we just heard it's about to become the 5th when it takes over South Korea. And the 22nd largest exporter. That means a lot, or in fact most of India's car market is used domestically. We're seeing a future for electric vehicles. An electric vehicle uses in its wiring about 3 times as much copper as a non-electric one uses. But also in the way the vehicles are made, and what you're looking at there are fingertips from welding robots, which will produce about 2,500 welds per small car before they're changed for a new pair. They're absolutely vital for constructing cars. But as we go to lighter grades of steel and boron-coated steel, they need to change. One of the biggest things Luvata innovates is new changes in these all the time. So aside from the use of copper alloys, this is an opportunity for India to show its brilliance in engineering, because there's a lot of engineering goes into the design of these consumables. So whether you see it as a metal consumption industry, or whether you see it as partnering with your automotive industry just by supplying the engineers, this is a fantastic thing that India can get involved with. In fact, if you look back since 1995, global car production has risen absolutely reliably, 2 million units per year. It's a wonderful opportunity. Superconductors. A superconductor, for those who don't know, it's a superconducting wire. It's a copper wire with an alloy down the middle, a niobium-based alloy down the middle, that has, at low temperature, absolutely zero resistance. You can create immensely powerful magnets with it. With those powerful magnets, anyone here who's had an MRI scan, a pulse of magnetism makes all the cells, all the water cells in your body suddenly face one way and then drop back again, ever so quickly. And then the photon that is emitted by all those atoms is picked up by the superconducting magnet to create a picture of what's inside you. Today we use 2 and 3 Tesla magnets. We're working on an 11 Tesla magnet. The 11 Tesla magnet will show you live video of the inside of a human body and be able to detect the chemical changes in your brain that lead to the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Superconducting technology can produce proton beam emitters that can pass a single ray of protons right through your body without causing you any harm whatsoever. The same superconductor can form a barrier layer through the middle of your body exactly where a tumor is. So when the proton beam hits the barrier, it burns out just the tumor. We're already cutting tumors out of people without cutting them open. 5 years ago, that therapy cost £100,000 a session on a piece of equipment the size of this room. Today, thanks to copper superconductor innovation, it happens on a machine 1/5 the size of this room for £10,000. Copper-based superconductors give us healthcare, and in India, where you have currently 0.7 hospital beds per 1,000 people, you have a massive growth opportunity in healthcare. Imagine the growth opportunity of making your own equipment for healthcare. The aging population of all our developed countries will demand more superconductors. They can be manufactured here. Scientific experimentation into things like fusion energy all uses superconductors. All things that can be done here. Back at the start of this session, we heard some excellent quotes about innovation, about doing things well. My favourite quote about innovation is from Charles Darwin, who says it's not the strongest that survives, but the one most willing to change. I am incredibly excited to be in India because you are at that starting position. You're at the starting blocks of becoming one of the world's most important economies. There are so many great things you can do about the generation of your power, about your healthcare, about your infrastructure, about your food refrigeration, so many, many things you can do. But the most important thing is that you can do those things better than the rest of the world did. You've got the chance to start and learn from all the mistakes that everybody else has made. And I say with complete confidence that I think that India will. I think that in 10 years' time we're going to be looking at a country that's leading the world. Not a country that's thinking, how can we partner with the world? But a country that the world looks at and says, wow, they fix their problems well, and they can fix our problems well. And so I'm going to ask you, please, just one thing. This is my message that I bring to you from the rest of the world. When India leads the world, as you will, remember us, and please don't leave us behind. Thank you.